here in rare archive footage from a karate tournament in 1967. He also perfected a super fast and powerful blow known as the 1-inch punch.
This guy was probably the fastest person I've ever seen. And he had that strength. I mean, the 1-inch punch, for instance, he would knock you clear across the room.
Lee's speed was legendary. Even when slowed down to a quarter speed, his strike is still hard to capture on camera.
He could stand 5 feet away from you, leap in there and tap you on your face and be back here standing before you could move, before you could intercept it. And then every time they'd say, well, wait a minute, I wasn't ready, do it again. And he'd do it about 2 more times and they'd say, oh, hell, you know, I can't put up with that, you know.
I think a lot of the speed and timing that Bruce Lee had was, from the conditioning and strength and the way his body worked. He was very, very concerned with his fast twitch muscle. That 1-inch punch that he developed, one of the fastest strikes and still used today, and that transfers over, obviously, into the boxing side.
This ability to pack a punch has been acknowledged by some of the world's best boxers.
That was the most amazing thing about Bruce, was the fact that he could generate so much speed and velocity in his punches. Short punches that he used his body and the type of leverage he was able to gain, because he understood the mechanics of the body.
Bruce Lee didn't just confine himself to exercising his muscles. He was also concerned with the fuel he was putting into his body. He began experimenting with high-protein drinks that he blended himself and supplemented with ginseng, royal jelly, and massive doses of vitamins.
He was very known for taking vitamins and minerals and stuff like that, and he had to go and find these various different ones and put them together, where now we can just walk into any store and be able to buy certain supplements like that. So a lot of the things he was doing as an athlete back then is things that we incorporate now as bodybuilders.
Bruce Lee's approach to high-protein drinks was revolutionary and shocked some of his colleagues when he returned to Hong Kong.
At that time, when we were not making movies, we would go to his house. He showed us how he ate beef, raw beef from the US. He put the raw beef into the blender and added milk, 7 eggs, and then wow, he gulped that thing down. We were terrified. It was amazing.
And it wasn't just his high-protein shakes that shocked his friends.
Sometimes he used electric current. He was really mad, giving himself electric shocks voluntarily. He was fighting with the electricity. Of course, we could not do it. I do not know how many volts the electricity was, but he was challenging the electricity.
You know, it's really funny that nowadays if you go to any professional sports orthopedist place or physical therapist, you go in there and you see them using the electronic stimulation machines to rebuild muscles to help damaged areas. But way before that was employed in any physician's room, you saw Bruce Lee doing that at home on his own. He was just truly a pioneer and way ahead of his time.
Revolutionizing attitudes towards health and physical fitness is just one of the many ways Bruce Lee changed the world. But while the West has been quick to recognize his achievements, it's only recently that China and Hong Kong have begun to embrace their best-known son. It's been more than 35 years since the man universally hailed as the king of martial arts movies died after making just 4 kung fu films. Since his death, Bruce Lee has been recognized as a visionary who changed not just action movies and martial arts, but also philosophy, music, and pop culture. Almost 50 years after Bruce Lee arrived in Hong Kong to make his first kung fu movie, his daughter Shannon is returning. She's here to meet former friends of her father's and to promote the Bruce Lee Foundation that she now heads. Film producer Raymond Chow was Bruce Lee's friend and business partner. As head of Golden Harvest Studios, he was the biggest film producer in Hong Kong. Now aged 80, he stopped doing interviews some time ago, but has arranged to make an exception for Shannon, the daughter of a man he first saw on a television talk show nearly 40 years ago.
It's a fateful evening that I watched that, so I decided to call him first thing in the morning. And I'll say that's the beginning of something important in the movie industry.
Bruce Lee changed the way actors were treated by studios by negotiating his own contract and taking a creative role in the writing, producing, directing, and choreography of his films.
You and my father had kind of an interesting and revolutionary relationship for the Hong Kong film industry, right?
Yes, I think that's the only fair way to do it. And it avoid a lot of problems of negotiating things. And Bruce and I, the relationship was so close. He didn't want to have that. I didn't want to have that.
The first film Bruce Lee made with Raymond Chow was The Big Boss, about the struggle of the Chinese community in Bangkok.
Thanks, James. Remember your promise. You're on your own from now on. You know, boy, a woman can be a blessing or a ruin to a man.
The Big Boss was a classic example of the way a Hong Kong movie ran at the time, which was fast, cheap, and a little bit out of control.
Having left America to make his name in the East, it was an important film for Lee. It was made on a shoestring budget, and he struggled to turn an incomplete script into a coherent and captivating story. Knowing that the film could make or break him, Bruce Lee sat nervously with his wife Linda at the premiere.
When the film was over, it was perfectly quiet. You could hear a pin drop in that theater, and Bruce was like, oh my gosh, do I make for the exit right now or what? And then all of a sudden it started. The clapping, the cheering, they loved it. They were thrilled, and Bruce was thrilled. It was wonderful. They escorted him outside. They raised him up on their shoulders, and he was their hero from then on.
Also in the audience was a 24-year-old assistant director who was yet to make his first feature film. John Woo would go on to become one of the most influential action movie directors of his generation, responsible for films such as Broken Arrow, Face Off, and Mission Impossible 2.
When the people watch the movie, they didn't know how to react to it because, it's so new, so different. It's so different from other martial arts movie. Maybe Bruce's performance too powerful. And then after they find a real fame, and then they're all very happy and they all cheer and clapping, I think at that moment, at that night, we have found our true hero. And from that night, Bruce Lee became a legend.
Despite costing less than $100,000, The Big Boss smashed all local box office records. But even before the premiere, Bruce Lee had already started working on his next film, Fist of Fury, a film that would help create a sense of patriotism in Hong Kong.
At the beginning of the film, there's this whole thing, and they give him the sign saying, Dong Na Beng Fu, sick men of Asia. And he comes back and he says, Hong Kong people. Chinese people are not sick men of Asia. And I think Hong Kong people were like, Hong Kong people are not sick men. They took that message to heart, and they cheered him on. He was really like the prodigal son returning back to be embraced by Hong Kong as a community. But I think that's his place was, he was part of a movement to create an indigenous identity for Hong Kong people, and I think that identity continues to this day.
China in the early 70s was caught up in the Cultural Revolution, which was a hideous, hideous, bloody interlude in modern Chinese history, where hundreds of thousands of people died, children turned on their parents. It was awful. And you had people running away from China, fleeing to Hong Kong and saying, our country is drowning in blood. People couldn't be proud of that China. So instead they were proud of this mythological China, and the place that mythological China came from were movies. It was like buying a ticket to a movie theater. It was like getting a passport to what you knew was in your heart was the real China. And that was one of the things that Bruce Lee saw.
For many Chinese people, the strong character played by Bruce Lee was both revolutionary and inspiring.
We were so weak, and we had been looked down by so many. So after Fist of Fury, they feel they are not sick anymore, and they become strong. All because of Bruce Lee.
heartsick man.
As in The Big Boss, Bruce Lee played a nationalist hero. The character struck a chord with Chinese audiences, so with his third film, Way of the Dragon, he played on the same themes. This fight scene with karate champion Chuck Norris in the Colosseum in Rome is celebrated by martial arts fans as an all-time classic. Once again, Lee plays an upstanding and understated Chinese character that defeats his non-Chinese foe.
They also had encouraged me to make my own film with the real Chinese spirit. You know, that's how I got the influence. You know, and also make me believe if you work hard, you will success. You know, same as Bruce Lee.
Today, decades after becoming an unlikely star in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee is now embraced as an icon for all of China. In recognition of his contribution to Chinese culture, the authorities there are opening a $25 million memorial park near Bruce Lee's ancestral home of Shunde.
You know, it is the ancestral home of my family, so I've always wanted to go and see that just from a historical point of view. And it's a very interesting trip for me because I've never actually crossed the border from Hong Kong into China. So this is my first time going there, traveling by bus, and I'm just really excited to see it. Also to see what they have, you know, for my father there.
Before Shannon visits the memorial park, she's been invited to see her grandfather's house to take part in a traditional incense burning ceremony. Word has spread of Shannon's visit, and the whole town turns out to welcome her. Complete with a nunchuck-spinning Bruce Lee look-alike. The park is spread over 1.9 million square kilometers. As well as a museum, it will eventually host an 18-meter-high statue of Bruce Lee. For decades, the Chinese government banned Bruce Lee's films, but his attitudes towards free enterprise and individualism have softened. They've realized that Bruce Lee is an ideal icon for the new China.
His spirit is the same as that of the Chinese people, which is never say die, be unyielding, and keep striving. Values which are promoted in China nowadays.
The museum in China looks set to be followed by one in Hong Kong, where they intend to turn Bruce Lee's former house into a museum as well. Bruce moved into this house in 1971 and lived there until his death in 1973. This is the first time Shannon has been back since.
I lived here from the age of 2 to the age of 4. You know, it looks very different than it did before. It was much more of a home. There was grass, and so it's a little different, but it's very nice, very reminiscent for me to be back here.
Yu Panglin is a billionaire real estate and hotel owner and one of China's most generous philanthropists. He's agreed to donate the house to the government so long as they let him expand the building to include a cinema, shops, and a library.
I think it's such a natural fit. I mean, my father, though he was born in the United States, he grew up here. His family lived here. Shunde is just very near to here, so it seems really natural for there to be a museum here. But you know, Hong Kong is a hustling, bustling, ever-changing place. It's hard to find a dedicated space for such a thing. And so, you know, now that he's willing to donate, this just seems like such a natural idea. So I think it just makes all the sense in the world.
The news of this museum coincides with another sign of the Chinese government's relaxing attitude, with the broadcast of a 50-part television series on the state-run channel called The Legend of Bruce Lee.